Hi, and welcome to Loyalty Leaders Podcast. David Feldman here, Chair of Loyalty Summit Americas. And today I'm going to be talking with Seth Miller from Paxex.aero about Starbucks Odyssey and Starbucks' decision to sunset the program effective March 31st. And let's welcome Seth. Hi, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Good to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
Now, so some background people that either, perhaps their memories don't extend prior to the pandemic or it's been a while or whatever else. But, Seth and I go back a long ways. And specifically, when we're talking about the idea of Starbucks Odyssey or the connection between blockchain and loyalty programs, Seth and I spoke together and did a presentation together on blockchain loyalty in Chicago, was it? Or like
Chicago,
5 or 6 years ago?
17 or so?
Oh, wow. It was in the before times. It was in the before times. And I guess as a very quick summary, and we'll sort of keep it PG rated here. But basically the conclusion that we presented was that, you have blockchain over here, you have loyalty programs over here, and there was a very, very, very small overlap. But the key takeaway, I think, from that conference is that overlap really was technology based. And that may be of interest to the IT department. It may be of interest to the CIO. As a general rule, irrelevant to the marketing department and irrelevant to the customer-facing side of loyalty. Now, with that as background, the reason for our chat today is Starbucks Odyssey. Starbucks Odyssey was, as Starbucks themselves promoted it, a Web3 loyalty program running in parallel to the traditional Starbucks rewards program. It didn't replace it or anything like that, but you would log in with your Starbucks rewards login ID, all the rest. And essentially what you could do was complete activities. They called them journeys, but essentially it was quizzes or watch a video and learn about how coffee is made. There'd be some tasks like reuse your reusable cup at a Starbucks store or order a seasonal beverage or something like that. And you'd receive points, but these points lived in the Odyssey system. You couldn't redeem them for free drinks in the traditional Starbucks program. And if you completed journeys or what have you, you could earn stamps, which is what they called essentially what were NFTs. But Starbucks very deliberately stayed away from using sort of any blockchain or Web3 related jargon, which I think is an interesting point to talk about as well. At the same time, there was a marketplace built in with Starbucks Odyssey where you could trade your stamps. And at various times, Starbucks dropped releases of special edition stamps, which you could purchase, of course, from Starbucks for like $100 a piece. And then you could trade them on the marketplace if you wanted to, or you could keep them and they'd give you bonus points, to help you complete further journeys and things like that. It was a very gamified experience. This last week, just a couple of days ago, they announced that Starbucks Odyssey is no more. The Discord server's already been closed. I think it's already closed. And at the end of this month, March 31st, they're going to sunset the entire program. Any remaining stamps you have in the marketplace will be transferred to the nifty Gateway marketplace, but Starbucks Odyssey itself is no more. Seth, taking all that into account, quick takes, quick thoughts.
I'm shocked to discover gambling in this establishment. Old Casablanca reference for those who don't get it. You should. It's worthwhile watching. It was a program that didn't really offer benefits. It had some of the gamification in it. Okay, sure, cool. But gamification only works if you get stuff as a reward that is worthwhile for playing the game. And ultimately, there was no value in this program, right?
I was trying to look for my little Starbucks Odyssey passport, coffee passport, but I think it already ended in the trash this week. Sorry.
Well, you got 12 more days to get value from it, Dave. I mean, right? But like here, the fact that they're willing to shut it down so quickly or with such little notice is a good indication of A, how little adoption it had and value it presented to the company, and B, how unused it was by consumers, right? If they were worried about blowback, if they were worried about any of those things, there would have been a real wind down process. There would have been a much longer horizon. But right, like all of the things you identified, the gamification, cool stuff. We talk about this all the time in loyalty of how to get people engaged with your brand, get them to do these silly little things. That's really good for a program. but there has to be something else on the other side for that consumer. Otherwise, what are we doing here? You're pissing them off, not inducing them to good behavior.
I know. I think it's interesting to call out. I mean, we're talking about 18 months. You know, we're talking about it launching, was it September 2022?
That's enough time to try.
It's certainly enough time to try, but it's, you know, it's a fairly short run. I have to say, I'm kind of to your lighthearted comment of I'm shocked.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not shocked at the end of Starbucks Odyssey. I'm not shocked that it didn't grow enough legs to grow into something more. I am a little surprised at just how early they ended it. I thought it probably had enough critical mass to just kind of slowly continue on. They'd stop talking about it, and eventually it would just kind of everyone would forget about it, you know, another 12 or 24 months from now, and it would go that way. But as you say, they've pulled the pin, and they've pulled the pin very quickly. Not much wind down horizon at all, which is rather surprising. But as you say, they're obviously not expecting much blowback. There's probably, you know, despite what some people might suggest, I think that's clearly indicative of very low engagement, and they feel very low impact.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, if it's on the blockchain, we could go look at what these stamps have been issued, right? In theory, somewhere there's a blockchain explorer that could go find some of this data. But I've done that actually with some of the loyalty programs that issue NFTs for stuff like, are they actually trading? No.
So yeah, just on that point, actually, Seth, it's interesting. So I did some analysis on that, and just very, very, very quick top level type stuff. The two biggest drops that Starbucks did. The very first one they did was in March last year, called the Siren Collection. This was their first drop. It was very, very, you know, obviously popular, oversubscribed. You know, it sold out in like 18 minutes or something. But realistically, the website crashed and nothing worked together, and people couldn't log in and all the rest of it. You know, and some people took a takeaway from that of, oh my Lord, look how popular these are, all the rest of it. But I think there's some interesting takeaways about that. And we'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of money, obviously the Starbucks minted NFTs that they dropped and sold directly to consumers in the program there. Obviously, Starbucks makes the money directly from the primary sale of that. But then they're also taking a royalty from all the secondary transactions on the marketplace. So Starbucks are very clever in the way they set this up, and, you know, obviously commercial goals, all the rest of it. That first collection, we're talking about there was 2,000 stamps at $100 each. That's $200,000 in primary revenue. In terms of secondary activity, we're talking about just under 830,000 in secondary volume dollars on the marketplace. So that first drop netted Starbucks, roughly speaking, about $280,000 at the end of the day. Their second drop.
Sorry, the 83,000 was net revenue in the commissions or total transaction volume?
From the commissions.
Okay, so it's like
roughly speaking, very, very quick back of the envelope, roughly speaking. So including their primary sale and the secondary commissions, we're talking about 280,000 of revenue. Their second collection launched a month later, called the First Store Collection. That was 5,000 NFTs. Obviously, the tech and the platform worked much better, all the rest of it. Here's a couple of takeaways. Didn't sell out.
Right.
Same price, 1 month later, didn't sell out. We're talking primary plus secondary of only 390,000 in secondary activity. Starbucks' share from all of that, just shy of about $500,000. So half a million.
Still made more money, but not nearly the same level of and everything else.
Absolutely. The issue is, of course, because it didn't sell out, it also means resale value was not as speculative it was for the first one. So those that were trying to get in on the game, to whether they were Web3 aficionados or actually perhaps genuine Starbucks Rewards members who thought, oh yeah, I'll get in on this too. Not going to happen. They basically did their $100, and I think that was the nail in the coffin going forward, for at least for that aspect of the program, for the NFT aspect of the speculative NFT aspect of the program. Which, let's be honest, over the previous few years, that was really what NFTs were all about. I know Web3 purists will say that's not what NFTs are about, but in reality, that's what they're about. So you know, we're talking, when I look at all the other secondary activity on the marketplace, there are a couple of other drops that happened. My back of the envelope figures is Starbucks made just a little shy of 1.4 million on NFT activity in the program. Now, that doesn't include any of their marketing costs, and and that doesn't include any of the sort of facilitation fees or incentive payments given to Starbucks by the chain to be on the chain and things like that as well. So, you know, I think it's safe to say Starbucks didn't lose in doing this. But for an organization as large as Starbucks, you know, forgetting about one-off payments, to only be making about 1.4 million in 18 months, you can see why they've probably assessed that there's no realistic ROI to continue operating the program.
How many hours of meetings do you think were had with people in them? If you know, $100 a head per hour, I bet they did lose money, right? Like,
that's I mean, if you were to properly account for it, that's probably
had to develop some collateral, all of that stuff. Like I could see it that it was a money losing, maybe not much, but I could certainly say, you know, they're a big company, right? All these numbers are rounding errors, but
yes,
it wasn't, even if they made $1 million, that's a rounding error. Like that's opening another store across the street within a big city, and then we're okay.
Yeah. So no, I think it's a good conclusion though, for Seth, because I think that, you know, I think if there's any doubt as to, well, why didn't they continue it? It's like, okay, well, clearly they're not seeing a pathway for this being a money-making machine. Therefore, as you say, there are other better uses for their capital investment, their operating investment, that are going to deliver a better ROI. I mean, it's a clear commercial decision.
Yeah. And so a couple of thoughts there. One of them, though, is they made this decision against the backdrop of what has been a relatively impressive bull run for Bitcoin, right? Like the value in fiat currency of Bitcoins is up dramatically in the last several months. And yet still, Starbucks directly and the industry more broadly has not seen a recovery of NFTs as a compelling thing. You mentioned earlier it was basically all speculation. I tend to agree. No one thought it was, you know, shouldn't say no one. Much less of it was about it deciding that this is good art that I want versus this is something I think I might be able to resell later for more money. The part where they took a commission off of it was certainly sort of the second or third generation of the NFT concept of that sort of built-in commission. Airlines have done similar things with their approach to NFTs and loyalty as well, and are very happy with it. But again, not selling out, secondary market's pretty light. How is that really going to play long term? You know, overall, none of these numbers are big enough to worry about, but at some level, at some point, they have to make a decision. Is this worth our energy to keep trying to create the quests or whatever, to keep doing those things? And is that engagement actually good for our brand? And so if the consumers don't really get anything from it, aren't really happy with the engagement, aren't actually engaged, what are we doing here?
You know, I think an interesting question, Seth, you know, when I talk with people about this, you know, I always come back to the fact that I think with things like Starbucks Odyssey, there was so much noise. You know, there's so much distraction. I mean, and you and I have been dealing with this, you know, like we said, for 5-6 years, whatever it's been. You know, we've been talking about blockchain loyalty. You know, you have there was an enormous amount of noise and misinformation. You have what I'm going to call regular program members. On one hand, so whether you're in this case, let's talk Starbucks rewards, but it could be an airline, a hotel, whatever it might be, whatever the loyalty program is. In this case, it's your genuine Starbucks rewards members, your person who has the app, likes to mobile order, likes to get their pumpkin spice latte, goes in the store. That's why they're a member of the Starbucks reward program. They like to get their free coffee after X number of purchases or X number of dollars spent, as it is today. On the other hand, you have what I'm going to call, you and I like to call our blockchain fanboys or our Web3 fanboys, the evangelists, or even to some degree, a subset of those are the purists, and those are and there's different groups within that segment as well, right? Like you have your people that, to use the purists, that believe in decentralization and peer-to-peer transactions and digital ownership and things like that. All those things that underpin the concept behind NFTs and things like that. All the blockchain, immutable transaction history, stuff like that. You have your vendors, which, I think we generally have fairly low regard for, because they're snake oil salesmen. They're selling, they're selling this not nefarious, abstract concept. But typically, you and I have coined and used the term solutions looking for problems, in various guises. And most of them don't have a real product, and they're not really solving a real problem. But a lot of them are trying to scare brands into, oh, you're going to miss the train. You have to, you have to do this. And we have big consulting firms that are guilty of this as well. Oh, well, we'll come in and solve this for you, of course, for $1,000 an hour. Blah blah blah. And big brands are scared of missing the train on this. And I think that there is a subset even of loyalty practitioners. And I say this as a loyalty consultant, that are guilty of this as well, of scaring clients into, or trying to ride the bandwagon. So I think you have genuine program members, you have Web3 folks, and again, some of them are just so desperate, especially the evangelists, for a mainstream brand loyalty program to adopt Web3 so that Web3 can go mainstream, whether it's because they're a vendor trying to sell stuff, or they're just a passionate aficionado that just wants to see it go mainstream. But there's a whiff of desperation there. And then you also have, I think, on the other hand, you have the brand, in this case, Starbucks. And I think it's helpful in these circumstances to kind of look through the lens of those three groups to sort of see how it might look. And I think we just briefly talked about the Starbucks perspective, at least how it ended. But maybe let's talk about Starbucks looking at it in the beginning. Was Starbucks, ostensibly a couple of things stand out to me. Starbucks deliberately touted this as a Web3 loyalty program, although they abstracted all the Web3 terminology. They didn't call it NFTs. They didn't mention anything about blockchain or crypto wallets or anything like that. Everything was in everyday person language. But yet they still touted it as a Web3 loyalty program. How much of this, in your opinion, Seth, your observation, was Starbucks just in it to make a quick buck, in terms of ride the NFT wave, people are going to speculate in NFTs, we'll take some cash here, versus, hey, Starbucks Reward members are looking for ways to deepen their engagement with the brand, and we want to get our super fans involved in another way?
I think more the latter. Honestly, I do. I think that this, and we talked about Starbucks on the exit side. At the entry side, I don't entirely fault them for trying. And to your point about changing all the terminology, trying to make it more accessible, hiding the idea of what a crypto wallet is versus this is your account, and it's not what is it, NFT? It's just a stamp, right? Like you use terms that actually made sense to people. Maybe that was pushed some of the purists and the loyal, out of the equation. But for the broader market, I'm not mad about that. Mm-hmm. But I do think, as they started to get into it, and quickly realize that, this is a way to quickly realize that, like, the Web3 stuff maybe isn't all it's cracked up to be as a concept, right? Conceptually, do I need a decentralized loyalty program as a single brand? Like, in my brain, like, I want to control all of this. Mm-hmm. I want to know everything about my customer. I can enable peer-to-peer trading within a centralized environment. I don't need decentralized. I don't need blockchain for that. In fact, in many ways, that's makes it more expensive, more complex, and harder to manage. But so you start getting into the idea, were they scared into it by a consulting group or something that made them think we've got to be Web3 versus maybe we'll dip our toe in and just sort of see how this is playing and if this is a real thing. Again, it's unfortunately, at the end of the day, kind of a rounding error. Now, does this destroy Web3 loyalty for the rest of the world? Probably not. But I think there are plenty of other brands looking who are going to say, a company that had that strong of a brand loyalty play in general, played pretty hard. Like, their initial stuff, like we said earlier, they did all the right things with gamification, with doing the drops, with trying to encourage that interaction amongst the members. If they couldn't pull it off, how would we, as a brand that might hope to be at that level of dedication for the consumers? But Starbucks loyalists are pretty darn loyal.
You know, I think it's a really good takeaway there, Seth. I mean, I think, and let's come to maybe talk about those loyalists as the next group in just a second. Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, and I think you're right. I mean, when you think about NFTs, really, there's two things at play, right? You know, when you think about, obviously when you look at Odyssey, there was really two big components to Odyssey, what they introduced. Number one was the gamification, the journeys, and some of it was kind of cool. You know, you took a VR tour of a coffee farm in Costa Rica or something like that. You know, like just kind of, if you were interested in learning about that or being more immersive into the brand history and about coffee beans and things like that, you know what? It was kind of cool. Now,
that's good.
Did that have to have anything to do with Web3? Absolutely not. But they decided to put that into Odyssey, so that's fine. The second part is obviously the NFTs, and obviously the NFTs are all the stamps. Obviously, those were particularly the tradability of them, all the rest of it. Obviously, that was Web3 on blockchain, yada yada. But when you think about the NFT aspect, you know, really, there's two audiences there, right? There is the speculative crypto fanboys, which Starbucks absolutely knew they were going to try to attract, because those people are more than happy to part with their cash in the hope of making a quick buck, and Starbucks was more than happy to take their cash, and you know, and to take the commission on the secondary trades. The other aspect, though, is your Starbucks rewards members, your Starbucks coffee drinkers, your actual customers, who, hey, given the excitement around NFTs, might be interested in completing activities and engaging with activities in order to earn an NFT, which then could be traded. And I think we saw two things. Number one, from the speculative fanboy perspective, there certainly was that initial interest. That then waned off. That probably coincides with the fact that NFTs in general waned off in that time frame. Starbucks Odyssey came in at the end, really, of that fad. You know, but I think the other aspect is, well, how much did NFTs motivate and incentivize it and get traditional Starbucks members excited? And I think there's a big question mark on that. It's not a black mark, but I think there's a question mark on, really, was there any runway left on using that as an incentivization tool?
And I wonder, right, like, if you've got the secondary transaction money coming in anyways, did you need to sell them for $100? Could you have sold them given them away, sold them for $10? I mean, you certainly would have moved more initially in the volume. Maybe it floods the market, but or you make it things that are actually rewards, like trade some of your stars. Instead of getting a free drink, you get this stamp that moves you into the other world. I do wonder if that could have helped bridge the gap a little bit and brought some of the not so much Web3 purists into the program and help them understand the sort of Web3 concepts a little better, and maybe understand some of the risks as well. Like, I'm not giving up something. What's the potential return? How does this play out? But, you know, at this point, I can't sort of look at it like, so they sold, what you said, 2,000 the first time and a couple thousand after that. So you've got
4,500 out of 5,000.
Okay, so 6,500 sold total of these overall, you know, $100 NFTs. Is that 6,500 people that, like, now are kind of pissed at Starbucks that this $100 they invested is worthless? Or
yeah, I mean, I would say no, because a number of those, especially from the initial one, did sell at a profit. You know,
someone somewhere, right? Profit only comes if someone else loses at some level. But
I think it's fair to say that there's going to be several thousand current stamp holders that did make purchases either in those two drops or subsequent drops that
are just
weren't able to offload at a speculative profit. That might be like, oh well, that was money down the drain. But you know, hey, that's the nature of. You know, I don't feel sorry for those folks, because that's the nature of these things. It's not always upside.
Right. Well, but we know that. But how did Starbucks position it? And did they know that, you know, right? Sometimes I'm buying this NFT, I'm buying this drop, this stamp, whatever, to get access to other things too, right? You didn't get front of the line privileges because you were a member of Odyssey and you had the right stamp. You didn't get a free flavor shot. I'm making things up. I don't drink coffee.
No, but you know, actually, just on this aspect, I think that's right, because really, if you weren't playing the speculative game, what you did get with these other stamps was you got bonus points in Odyssey. You got Odyssey points, but the reality was there wasn't really much in the redemption catalog on the Odyssey side of things. So because of that, I think that also weakens as we maybe pivot the discussion to that third group, which is your genuine Starbucks rewards members, how much of Odyssey was really relevant for them? We just touched on NFTs, but what about then the points that you earn, whether it's from the NFT or from the journey completion? What did it get you? And as you say, it didn't get you these things. It didn't get you real world utility, or certainly not enough real world utility. Now you can say, well, maybe, some people are going to say, well, that's why it failed, because there wasn't this, but,
and that's right. You do need a redemption program to justify loyalty participation. There's got to be
redemption drives behavior.
Right. And so that you have to have a reasonable redemption out. And it sounds like they didn't. So that's part of the problem, but that's not why the program failed. I think we would both agree on that. It wasn't a well-structured loyalty program in terms of building patterns of behavior and trying to influence what people did, other than in a couple of very specific, the drops and a couple, maybe some of the, little things along the way. But unless they're really going to invest significantly in building these journeys on a very regular basis, right? You got to be generating people drinking coffee a couple times a week, daily, if not multiple times daily, for some of the most loyal customers, shall we say, right? Like how engaged can you get them and keep them? And not everybody needs 3 journeys a day also, but if you're doing one every 2 weeks or one a month, that's probably not enough to build any engagement in the program. And then I don't have engagement, I don't have rewards, I don't have the real world value of holding the NFTs in some way that carries back over, which, as the whole system was collapsing, was at least one way that some of these programs, some groups were trying to provide value out of it, holding an NFT in the real world. If 3 strikes, you're out, right? I don't have any of these things. What was the value of this program?
So here's a quote from social media this week. It was somebody on LinkedIn wrote, never understood what it was about, and I use my Starbucks mobile app frequently. As a loyal customer, I lost interest after not having access to whatever this program was for a long time. I remember it was sort of invite only right at the beginning. He goes on, the rewards weren't clear, and I didn't see any value of collecting their NFTs. I mean, to me, that person summed it up. Now, again, you're going to have some Web3 evangelists saying, well, that's why it failed, all the rest of it, yada, yada, yada. But, I think you also just summed it up pretty well there, Seth. I mean, ultimately, for that third group of people that we're talking about, that third perspective, the customers, the genuine customers, any program offering has to have some value for them, else they're not going to engage. So the traditional Starbucks program, albeit despite devaluations and all the rest of it, it has value for them, even though, yes, it costs more than ever to actually get a free cup of coffee now. But the reality is, if you're going regularly, if you engage, use the app, you're going to eventually get a free cup of coffee. But there's other benefits now as well. And people are Starbucks customers are like, you know what? It takes so many stars now to get a free drink, but the free drink isn't what it's all about now as well. Yes, I like the free drink, but I like the convenience of having my money stored on the app. I like the convenience of mobile order or the drive-through now. At many, physical establishments. So it's the convenience in a lot of cases out trumps anything else. But again, they were talking about real world utility from engaging with the program and being a member. And I think that probably leads to my next question. And that is that, I don't want to sound pessimistic and say there's anything to be salvaged from it. But one of the comments that or one of the critiques, I should say, that comes in from the Web3 community, your purists and your evangelists and all the rest of it is, well, Odyssey wasn't really Web3 because it was a walled garden. It was, self-contained. Although, yes, you could move your stamps technically out of Odyssey, into the marketplace and into a different crypto wallet and all the rest of it. But the minute you sold them or took them out of Odyssey, you lost your bonus points or any perks or tier benefits that came with holding them. It wasn't really decentralized. And ultimately, everything that Odyssey had actually could have just been run on Web 2. I'm not sure that's the criticism that some of the Web3 evangelists mean it to be, because I actually think it validates your point from earlier in the conversation, is that you can have these journeys and these immersive activities and this gamification in the core Starbucks rewards program and app without needing anything to do with Web3.
Yeah. And I understand the idea of fully fungible. Everything can move anywhere to anyone at any time, and that's where the real value comes from. But especially in a loyalty program, but in any of these things, right? The it that I have, whether it's my phone or this random cup I got at the conference today with popcorn in it that was delicious, whatever the it is that I have, if I want to get value from it, someone else has to want to trade me for that, right? The basis of fungibility. And so it doesn't matter what the it is. If I can't move it out of the walled garden, it's fungible inside. Is that truly Web3 or not? Like the idea that we're dealing with so many programs that look at private blockchains versus public these days because of operating costs and control. Like almost everything I feel like is moving in that direction from a corporate perspective. There are certainly some programs and things out there still that are building on Ethereum 2 or whatever, building on these public chains. There's plenty of those programs still out there, but again, those aren't loyalty programs. Those are generally cryptocurrency plays of some shape or form. And that's a different part of Web3, but to say one is or isn't truly Web3 based solely on that, I think it's maybe arguably a bad version of Web3 once you get into a walled garden, but it's still very much Web3. And if the thing that I have can't be traded, like when a program issues this coin, the idea isn't that Starbucks is going to issue me this NFT and then it wants that NFT to sort of wander off into blockchain world and suddenly like someone's trading it somewhere else, even though they still get their commission on it. They kind of don't care, but the whole point of this is to build brand value and keep people engaged with the brand. And this is one reason that public blockchain and loyalty don't necessarily work so well together is, again, having some control is where the brand gets value. And the idea that I'm going to take my stuff and move it into an off-chain, or, a cold storage, or move it to a different part of the chain. What are we doing here? Why would I want that?
I think they come to, I think this brings us back to the discussion that we were having 5-6 years ago in Chicago. And that is, you have blockchain on one side, you have blockchain or Web3, whatever. Well, let's talk about Web3 separately to blockchain. I mean, blockchain is a piece of technology. Web3 is a concept. Web3 is some people find a very abstract concept, but it's a very some people say a very clear concept of decentralization, peer-to-peer transactions, digital ownership, all that kind of business. Blockchain itself is a piece of technology, of a distributed ledger. Web3 is an interesting concept, may have some applications in certain environments. Blockchain as a piece of technology absolutely has its applications, just like if we're talking about a brand deciding to have its web server as Apache versus Nginx versus IIS, or its cloud provider being Azure versus AWS. These are technological discussions for the CIO and the IT department, not anything to do with marketing or anything public facing, right? Yeah. And that's really where blockchain should be sitting. But I think what's interesting is that Web3 as a concept isn't terribly compatible with brand loyalty, and certainly not formal loyalty programs, despite the notion of blockchain Web3 evangelists desperately wanting it to. Because the reality is like you say, it's all about first-party data. It's about building brand loyalty engagement internally. And ultimately, loyalty, whether it's big L loyalty programs or small L loyalty as a brand strategy, is all about customer behavior, customer affinity for the brand, customer emotions, and relationships. None of which is even remotely compatible with the concepts of Web3. And even in practice, Starbucks doesn't want to pay for you to redeem a reward at Burger King, and Burger King doesn't need McDonald's and Wendy's to validate that you legitimately earned that award at Starbucks. I mean, that's just, that's messed up.
And that's what it really comes down to, is the idea of, like, I have points in heavens knows how many different programs. I would love to be able to say, you know what, I know I earned these points with this hotel brand, but they don't have any properties where I'm going, and so I'm just going to redeem them, and maybe even take a small haircut on the value, but I'm going to redeem them with this other program. That might work out better for me in some cases. Obviously, I should be earning more transferable points, et cetera. I know how, but I stay in hotels, right? So I get the hotel points from my stays. I'm not it's not an the hotel's best interest, certainly, to let me do that. It's only barely in my best interest to let me do that. And so that's not what loyalty is about. That's earning, it's rebate program at best. And a good loyalty program, whether it's a Starbucks, whether it's an airline, whether it's a hotel, whether anything, shouldn't be about a basic rebate. It should be about actual loyalty, those things you described, the emotional connections just now. That's where loyalty comes from. And that's where the big L loyalty programs win. And if you can't, and so it has, by definition, has to have some control.
Yeah, and look, I would love to redeem my orphan points in some obscure hotel program I stayed in once, or Panera I haven't eaten at in 6 months, you know, or, you know, we probably have 20 programs each where we have a few orphan points here. As a consumer, I would love to be able to have those as fully fungible and transferable and all the rest of it, even with a haircut, to be able to get some value out of it. But there's no value for the brand to allow me to do that. And so I get where Web3 evangelists who are not loyalty experts, I get where they're coming from, you know, in terms of, oh, this would be a great application of this technology, except in practice, it's of zero interest to the brand sponsoring these programs. And this is the discussion we had all those years ago.
Yeah, I could almost argue that the hotel brand might be happy because I was happy that I was able to get my points out eventually. And so maybe I don't hate them anymore, but I don't really hate them because they are not holding my points hostage. It just happens to be that's where my points are. And it's a different mindset. Maybe it's too rational for a loyalty conversation, right? Loyalty inherently is irrational behavior. But anyway, I think we agree here. There's no reason this wins.
So, you know, final thoughts, you know, and you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but final thoughts as we wrap up. You know, is there a lesson to be learned here in terms of, you know, definitively Web3 has no relevance to loyalty, or are there lessons to be taken away, you know, in terms of stop chasing fads, or, you know, hey, good on Starbucks for capitalizing on it and clearly getting out, you know, before they lost money?
I'm mostly in number 3, honestly. And, you know, like I said earlier, I don't fault them for trying. I think they played a fair game of it. I think, though, the lesson, you know, writ more broadly is, especially with a Web3 implementation, not super cheap to get into. It is complex. You need either very talented and aware staff on hand, or you're going to have outsiders helping you put it together. So recognize that, like anything, you know, upstart new thing, there's going to be a significant cost to get into it, and understand what your metrics are along the way so that you know if it's working or not. And you can, as Starbucks did, pull that ripcord very early in the process before you sink even more into it, right? Don't throw good money after bad. And Starbucks clearly may have thrown some good money after bad, but not even more good money after even more bad.
Good conclusion, Seth Miller. Thank you for joining. As always happy to talk with you about blockchain and loyalty. It's always a fun conversation you and I have over the years about this. Thanks for joining, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And if you haven't registered to attend Loyalty Summit this year, we have Loyalty Summit London coming up on the 5th and 6th of June. Please go to loyaltysummit.com for more information, to see the agenda, the list of speakers, and to register. And we'll be having Loyalty Summit Americas in Chicago, in fact, back to Chicago, September 11 and 12 this year as well. So
can I run the blockchain session?
I'll have to look and see if there's a blockchain conference in town again that week.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks, Seth. Bye now.